Welcome back to day 2 of Yonsei University's Symposium. My name is Alexis Hernandez from the Department of Sport Industry Studies here at Yonsei University. Thank you again for joining us as we continue to explore salutogenesis from various perspectives. Today we'll have 2 sessions with a short break in the middle, with closing remarks from Dr. Justin Jun at the end. Our first session will be led by Dr. Pike. Dr. Pike's area of interest include psychosocial stress, exercise, and food intake on the functionings of the human body. Please give a warm welcome as I turn the table over to Dr. Pike.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here today on our second day learning about salutogenesis together. So we have 3 fantastic speakers in this session. So I'll introduce them one in turn, and as we did yesterday, we'll hold all questions to the end, and then we'll have a panel discussion after all 3 speakers have given their presentation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Professor Jinsu Byun from the Department of Sport Industry Studies at Yonsei University, and the title of his talk will be Navigating Salutogenesis in Sport Policy and Governance Toward a New Research Agenda.
All right, everyone, can you hear me? Yeah. So good morning, everyone. Are you feeling okay today? Yeah, I'm feeling very salutogenic in this morning. I'm really excited to open today's session as the first presenter. And my name is Jinsu Byun, and I'm an assistant professor at Yonsei University in the Department of Sport Industry Studies. And I'm really excited to share my initial thoughts about navigating salutogenesis in sport policy and governance. My goal in my presentation is to share my ideas for generating the research opportunities regarding my research field by using the salutogenic perspective. So without further ado, let me start my presentation with the table of contents. So in my presentation, I want to start with the question about my research field, which is about sport policy and governance, to help you understand why I started to think about the importance of the salutogenesis approach in the study area. And then I'm going to focus on 2 important research opportunities regarding safe sport policies, and then I'm going to talk about polycentric health governance, which is another important topic that I want to share with you guys. And at the end of the presentation, I want to conclude my presentation by talking about some important implications for sport policy research regarding the salutogenic approach. So let me start with my question about salutogenesis, sport policy, and governance. You may not know about my research field, so I want to briefly introduce the importance of my research field and also the potential relationship between the salutogenesis and the research area. So when it comes to the sports, if you think about the term, there are a lot of positive memories or experiences that you have. So for example, if you think about sport activities or participation, you may be able to think about some healthy related aspect, mental, social, and also physical. However, when it comes to the sport field and the sports development, there are many problems at this point. For example, if you think about the elite sports supporting system, there are a lot of abusement and harassment. And that can be just an example, and we are decreasing the well-being of the individuals and the stakeholders in the field of sports. And I believe that it's important to extend our perspective by using the new framework. And the salutogenesis can be a new approach to expand our perspective in addressing that kind of problems. So in my presentation, I want to explore 2 important opportunities regarding the application of the salutogenic approach to the sport policy and governance. The first topic is about safe sport policy. And the second one is the fragmented health governance systems in the nation. So the first topic that I want to discuss in my presentation is about integrating salutogenesis into safe sport policies. So I'm not sure you are familiar with the safe sport concept, but I'm sure that you are familiar with the negative incident that we experienced in the recent decade, including the USA gymnastics scandal abusing the athlete from the team doctor, Larry Nassar. And then in the Korean context, we can think about Choi Soo-kyun case, who took her own life in 2020 after enduring years of physical and verbal abusement from the coaches. So because of that kind of negative incident, there has been increasing attention to the importance of safe sport policies and the environment. So the protection of athlete rights has been the main concern for the sports organizations, including the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, United States sporting agencies, and the Korean stakeholders as well. By definition, safe sport can be considered defined as follows. Safe sports in an environment where athletes can train and compete in healthy and supportive surroundings. An environment which is respectful, equitable, and free from all forms of harassment and abusement. So this is the definition from the International Olympic Committee about the safe sport. And actually, I want to kind of challenge that kind of definition in my presentation from the perspective of the salutogenesis by using the key tenet of the concept. Because they just focus on the eliminating the potential risk or harassment in the sporting environment. But I think that it's important to be proactive and we need to do more to protect the athlete and the people in the sport. Anyway, around the world, we have seen a lot of efforts regarding the development of the safe sport policies, including the IOC's efforts about their policies. And the United States and Canada, they established the safe sports organizations to implement educations and also programs for promoting athlete rights. However, I think that there is something missed in the effort. For example, there's a limited discussion regarding how to help actors, including coaches or athletes, to manage their health proactively, as I briefly discussed in the previous slide. And the current policies mainly focus on risk avoidance. Well-being, however, does not emerge simply because risks are absent. That's my key point, and the ideas about the safe sport and how we're going to apply the salutogenesis can be found on the slide. So my suggestion is to integrate the sense of coherence or the concept and tenet of the salutogenesis into the safe sport policies to design policies to enhance athlete engagement, resilience, and sense of belonging. For example, if you take a look at one education program from the Korean Sport Ethics Center, they provide just 1 hour education online for the stakeholders at this point. Do you think that that's enough for promoting the safe environment for the athlete? I don't think so, and we need to do more. Specifically, the program just focuses on very, very limited number of the stakeholders, like the athlete, coaches, and administrator. And it's too broad to support the understanding of the safe sport policies and initiatives. So another problem regarding the objectives of the program is to just let them understand the concept of the safe sports and the importance of protecting the athlete. But I think we need to do more in the near future. And I believe that it's going to be possible to expand our perspective through the salutogenic approach in enhancing the safe sport policies. Specifically, by applying the 3 key tenets from the salutogenic approach, I want to help you understand better what we can do in the near future. The first one is a comprehensibility. I'm sure that you are getting familiar with the 3 concepts regarding the salutogenesis because you are attending in this early morning and yesterday as well. Regarding the comprehensibility, we may help athletes and coaches easily understand human rights issues and how to address them. So athletes may ask regarding this point, am I in a safe environment or a safe sports situation? They need to know their situation. And I believe that comprehensibility will be an important aspect when we use the salutogenic approach. That can be the starting point. And regarding the manageability, it's empower athletes and coaches with the tools to manage and respond to human rights challenges. So when I think about the potential application of the salutogenic approach to the safe sports, resistance resources would be a key idea for the athlete because they don't know how they're gonna respond to that challenging situations in the sporting environment. So it's important to ask, do athletes and coaches have enough resources to handle safe sport-related issues and problems? And the last point is about meaningfulness. So we need to incorporate the safe sport policies and the approaches in the sport environment because we need to understand it's meaningful to support the athlete from the salutogenic approach in implementing the safe sport policies. So coaches may ask, why can helping athletes be meaningful for me and the sports system? So as the shared leadership and the shared community, I believe that salutogenic approach can help athletes to be protected and improve their well-being. So regarding the first topic that I introduced, I want to suggest some future research directions. The first one is related to the organizational level analysis to improve our understanding about how we're going to increase the organizational practices for the safe sport policies. So for example, we can think about organizational salutogenic factors and their role in preventing human rights violation in sport teams or sporting settings. And the second aspect is related to the educational programs for the safe sports to evaluate the impact of safe sport education on athletes and coaches SOC. And the third one and the first one is about the individual actors, including athletes, coaches, and understanding their SOC and how we're going to be able to enhance the ability to respond to the challenges and building the safe and safer sport environment. So now I'm going to move on to the second part, which is about applying salutogenesis to polycentric governance. So in order to help you understand about polycentric governance concept, I want to share some important definitions. Polycentric refers to many centers of decision making in relation to the policy agendas. For example, if you are the health-related decision makers, you need to organize and collaborate with the multiple sectors and the multiple decision-making stakeholders, including health-related organizations or sports organizations. And polycentric governance provide the key ideas about how we're going to facilitate the collaboration between the stakeholders while allowing their responsibility and the freedom in making the decisions. However, there are some negative features and negative potential impact of developing the polycentric governance. So if you have many organizations in relation to the sports or health-related decision-making process, they have their own perspective and they have their power to change the policies, which are not aligned with each other. That's the big problem. For example, high transaction cost to facilitate the collaboration and negotiation among stakeholders may be a problem. And weakened accountability is another problem. So if there's a high risk of making decisions, your organization may want to just avoid to make any decisions. So there's a problem, but no one wants to take the risk and take the responsibility. So that's the problem of the polycentric governance system in the health governance in Korea. So thanks to my student help, I developed this model and the figure to describe the current situation of the fragmented health governance system in Korea, which can be understood by the perspective of the polycentric governance. So if you take a look at the right side, National Promotion Act, which is the legal foundation for developing the sports in the nation, they just focus on the sport development and the policies, including some important actors and decision-making places, such as Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, the central government Organization and Division for Sport Development. And under the guidance, there are some key stakeholders in the sports sector, such as the local government, national federations, local sports association, etc. And if you take a look at the right side, there's a National Health Promotion Act, which is an important legal foundation for health promotion in Korea. Under the guidance, there are many stakeholders as well, like the Ministry of Health and Welfare, which is the central government division for promoting health in Korea. And there are a lot of stakeholders as well in the health side. And within the context, if you see the middle of the figure, Ministry of Employment and Labor and Ministry of Education also takes some responsibility for student athlete or educational activity for the exercise and health. However, as you can see in the figure in the middle, they are not communicating and they are disconnected. And it's a fragmented health governance, and from the polycentric governance perspective, it's a big problem because there's the limited understanding of each sector. So what is missing now? I want to highlight the 2 points as I briefly discussed in the previous slide. There's a lack of coordinated effort and inefficient resource allocation in promoting health and sports and education in our society. So my suggestions are as follows. The first one is the salutogenic approach. It would be important to build a theoretical and conceptual foundation to strengthen coherence and collaboration across these sectors. The concept of the salutogenesis can help us to come together and make some connections in the governance system to build new program from the salutogenic approach. By doing so, it's going to be possible to establish clear lines of accountability while sharing the responsibilities and resources to facilitate the health-related policies. I want to share one potential example that we can refer to. Health Enhancing Physical Activity, HEPA Europe. Actually, WHO, World Health Organization, implemented several policies by using this approach, HEPA Europe. And the key objectives of the program as follows, and I just want to highlight the 2 important points. The first one is contributing to the development of multisectoral and intersectoral policies and strategies for HEPA. And as you can see in the second point, it is to strengthen collaboration between the sectors. So I found their reports from the 2024 version, which is the latest version of the European region in implementing policies based on the approach. And as you can see, in terms of the developing the policy responses to tackle the health-related problems, they include sport, health, school, workplace, urban, spatial, and raising awareness. And we talked about diverse aspects and the topics that we can apply salutogenic approaches in the last few days and yesterday especially. And I believe that based on the approach, what we can try is to develop a Korean HEPA policy framework guided by the salutogenic approach. That's a potential idea, but I think that there's a strong connection between the concept of the salutogenesis and to overcome the fragmented health governance system. So by engaging stakeholders across health, sport, urban planning, and education sectors, it's going to be possible to develop integrated HEPA programs to overcome that kind of and such fragmented health promotion efforts. And here are some future research directions for me and for my student in my lab, or all together. So the first one is to diagnose how we're gonna understand the fragmented health governance system. If you remember the figure that I shared, that is the kind of starting point. And by applying the concept of the polycentric governance perspective, it's gonna be important to highlight the key negative problems in the disconnected and fragmented health governance system. And then we will be able to think about how we're going to develop the HEPA program or something similar by using the salutogenic approaches and the key tenet from the idea. And the last one is to build health governance, especially based on the collaborative effort across the sector by using the salutogenic approach. Now I'm going to conclude my presentation by summarizing the key implications from my presentation and also the potential for the future endeavors. Salutogenic sport policy. I think this is a kind of something new for me and for all students. But in the near future, I hope that this is going to be something taken for granted in our society. So we need to institutionalize and advertise the concept to the stakeholders in the field of health promotion, including sports, education, and health as well. So the starting point would be to drive a paradigm change, and I'm sure that this conference and the symposium will be a great start. And by using the salutogenesis concept, there is the potential to change our perspectives regarding health, sports, and policy. And by doing so, we will be able to develop the specific effort and the programs to tackle key problems in the sports and the health-related policies, including safe sport problems, as I briefly discussed in my presentation. And lastly, changing the system is the most difficult one, so it will take time. However, I believe that in the near future, it's going to be possible to strengthen our health and sports-related policies and system by using our salutogenic approach and the perspective. So here are the references. And before concluding my presentation, I want to say thanks to my lab member, Seongjun and Kyung-seok, for their contribution for the development of the ideas. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Byun, for that fantastic presentation. I'll now introduce our second speaker, and that is Dr. Eun Young Lee from the School of Kinesiology and Health Studies at Queen's University in Canada. And the title of her presentation is Application of a Salutogenic Model of Health, a Fresh Perspective on Physical Activity and Health Research.
Okay, hello everyone. I thought this will be higher than, this is lower than I expected, so that's good. But I'll probably be walking around. This feels a little bit restricting, but I'll make sure that I don't move around too much. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about how we can apply salutogenesis in physical activity and health research. And I'm going to be talking about a lot about my own research and how I can relate to salutogenesis, because I'm just exploring the idea like others. And I really thank Justin and the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity to speak about this in my alma mater and also in front of my two ex-supervisors. I thought this would be really stressful actually, but it's been really nice. Like I really love having both of my ex-supervisors in the same room, and also she's kind of my ex-boss. She was the director of our school like 3 years ago. Yeah, so very interesting feeling right now. So. Yeah, so I'm going to start with this old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And this is, I think, really reflecting what salutogenesis is and what the salutogenic environment can do. So, you know, when we raise a holistic and healthy child, you know, we not just the immediate parents or immediate environment, we really need the collective community support, collective community actions to really raise a holistic children. And I'll talk about where I began my journey to salutogenesis. And of course, Justin introduced me to the idea, but I teach fourth-year seminar on critical health promotion at Queen's University. And we go all the way back to 1970s. And in 1970s, it was about really exhortations of healthy lifestyle. So, you know, individuals can engage in physical activity, can do whatever they need to do to stay healthy. So it was really focusing on individual responsibility of health. Then in 1980s, we moved on to Ottawa Charter that really drove the approach to socio-ecological modeling and the healthy communities. Then in 1990s, it was about the new determinism, so population health. So the readings that I had in this course was actually Antonovsky's Salutogenic Model. I didn't even realize when I was assigning this reading, but this is one of the papers that I assigned to my students to read. Then for population health, it's Rose's sick individuals and sick populations. And I think there's some alignment with salutogenesis in both of the readings, for sure. And I would say ontologically, and I would situate in between health promotion and population health. I really like the idea of health promotion. It's very idealistic. I like the community, sense of communities and building healthy communities so that all individuals can be healthy within that environment. But also I really like the realistic aspect and practicality of population health. And there are some similarities. Of course, population health was driven by economists, but health promotion and population health, they both situate physical activity as a means and as an outcome as well. So when we talk about healthy health promotion, there's an emphasis on how to encourage physical activity, so how we can provide behavioral and environmental support so that everyone can be healthy within different communities. Whereas population health, it has emphasis on why it matters at the societal level and how to ensure equitable access across different populations. So this is the question that I had for a long time. Probably since my PhD years, I started to formulate this idea, asking these questions, and this really challenged me intellectually and epistemologically. So why do physical activity promotion efforts continue to be overlooked and sidelined in public health priorities? Right? Like we have cigarette smoking, we have tobacco control, alcohol consumption control, and physical activity promotion, it always gets kind of sidelined. It's not the top priority when we talk about public health initiatives. So when I think about competing interests, okay, what's more important than physical inactivity? Then for Canada, it's climate change, indigenous rights and reconciliation, lots of social issues like affordable housing and homelessness, immigrant and refugee integration, youth vaping, social media use is another thing. And for the states, I would say it's Trump, but nothing else. It's just Trump. Of course, they have existing problems like, racial violence and gun violence, and Trump just perpetuates that hatred and violence. So, if we get rid of Trump, that would be perfect. And for Korea, what do you think? What kind of competing interests do we have? Anyone? What's more important than physical inactivity?
Aging?
Aging, yes. Having more elderly populations. Education. Emphasis on education, yeah. Environment, yeah, environmental issues. So we have climate change and air pollution issues. What else?
Social conflict.
Social conflicts, yeah. And political divide.
Yeah.
Yeah, so demographic challenges, air pollution, climate change, mental health issues, elderly poverty and isolation, low birth rate, all the issues that we have, and also lifestyle-related health problems like high smoking and alcohol consumption. And we've learned that, smoking and alcohol consumption is really high among middle-aged men, like 20% of the male populations smoke cigarettes, and 5% of females smoke cigarettes. And that's really high, probably, especially for men. So in asking this question, the drive in the context of Canada was the budget cuts for the physical activity promotion sector that happened in 2023. So it was just 2 years ago. And one of the illustrative examples is the Participation. It's the largest not-for-profit organization aimed at promoting physical activity among Canadians. And they experienced budget cut in 2023, and they have low budget now. And the reason that I'm attributing to is because physical activity research and funding has largely been driven by its health benefits, physical health benefits especially, based on a strong emphasis on biomedical evidence. So it's very pathogenic. The research has been very pathogenic. The grant application and the success of the grant has been very pathogenic. And also under the neoliberal agenda, framing of physical inactivity as a public health concern that places accountability on individuals for their own health. And I'm going to go back to this point in relation to salutogenesis. So, under neoliberalism, physical activity, if you're not physically active, it's your fault. If you want to be healthy, you can be more active, right? That's the framing for physical activity so far, I believe. And lack of political engagement in physical activity research contributed to its diminishing prioritization among politicians and decision makers. They don't really care about physical activity promotion because it's individual responsibility, right? But the real drive of asking this question is frustration. It's the frustration that has been piling up for over the years. And we know that physical activity is good. Like, there's no doubt. Physical activity has multifaceted benefits. It has physical health benefits, mental health benefits, social health benefits. It also bridges divides and reduces crime rates. It potentially buffers the negative impact of climate change. It advances several of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and many more. There are so many benefits, there's no debate, but it's continuously getting overlooked and sidelined. So sorry about the very aggressive looking slide, but while the multifaceted benefits of achieving sufficient population level physical activity are widely recognized and non-controversial, so it's apolitical, it's not political issue. We know that physical activity is good, there's no debate. But the issue often receives low political priority amidst existing and emerging challenges, particularly when economic or strong public interest take precedence. So for example, electric vehicle adoption over cycling or active transportation infrastructure is a political issue, right? Electric vehicle companies, they lobby the government to lower the price or to get tax benefits, etc. And I'm not against the electric vehicles if anyone drives, but having the proper active transportation infrastructure is I believe, better. It has more benefits in the long term. Influence of tobacco industry lobbying on public health policies, very political issue. We know that in epidemiology, the strongest association was found between cigarette smoking and lung cancer. When we look at the epidemiological data, the odds ratio is like over 100. That's really strong, right? But still, people smoke. And why is that? And lastly, mask-wearing mandates framed as a conflict with personal freedoms, very political issues. So, when there are political, debatable issues, then it draws public interest, then it draws political decisions. So this is kind of a completion of the partial response of the question. And not to brag, this commentary got awarded for the best commentary in 2024. And I believe the award is because I got awarded because lots of physical activity researchers could relate to what I had to say. They could, I'm sure they were, resonating with the idea that I was presenting through this paper. So to summarize key messages, the physical activity sector is facing a decline in funding due to its neoliberal orientation that places health as an individual responsibility. The sector is also confronted with competing, more urgent or more political challenges such as climate change, youth vaping, harmful social media, all of which have been exacerbated by the pandemic. So through this paper, what I argue is that we must redefine and position physical activity as a vital part of the solution for addressing the complex challenges that we currently face, moving beyond a narrow biomedical emphasis, so moving beyond a pathogenic focus. So based on that, my work has evolved around two aspects. The first one, reframing physical activity as part of a solution. And the second, comparing different aspects of benefits between physical activity and its competing interest. So just some examples that I've done. One of the papers are actually led by John. But physical activity as a solution, the top left, I guess. In this paper, we explored physical activity as a mitigating or moderating factor on the relationship between climate change and physical activity and health outcomes, So what we found is that physical activity may buffer the negative impact of climate change on health outcomes. And the second paper, led by John, we were exploring the relevance of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in the promotion of sports, physical activity, and recreation in Canada. Physical activity versus competing interest. The first top paper, The Freedom to Pollute. In this paper, I looked at how neoliberal capitalist ideology, so looking at neoliberalism, and climate culpability, lifestyle factors, including physical activity, and how those independently influence or independently associated with non-communicable diseases mortality in 124 countries. And the next paper, The Political Landscape, we looked at the political orientation, so being central, being centrist, being conservative, being liberal, and how that relates to supporting policy actions addressing physical inactivity and climate change. So I've been doing some work around these ideas, like I've been flirting with these ideas for a while. And the current funded project that I do, or I'm going to be collecting data next summer, is actually to look at, rethinking outdoor play. So outdoor play is part of physical activity in the age of climate change. So how do children living in a megacity today perceive and engage in outdoor play, but also what support mechanisms, what supportive environment can be made to enhance access and opportunities for outdoor play in a changing climate among children living in a megacity. And New York City will be the pilot city for this work. And I really like this words from James Sellis. If kids are out there riding their bikes or walking, they're not burning fossil fuel, they're nobody's captive audience, they're not making money for anybody. So it is really, I think the core principle aligns with salutogenesis. It's talking about, they're not doing it, they're playing not because they want to, make money or they want to, make their parents happy. They're just doing it for fun, for their own well-being, right? They're not producing anything, but they're having fun, right? So this is one thing that I do. And the next one, empowering global youth for climate resilience. So all these projects that I do, I can relate with salutogenesis. I think the studies that I do and the ideas that I'm developing, it's very salutogenic, but it's the matter of how I can concretely link the concept or the model of salutogenesis and with what I do. So anyway, in this project, I am tackling resilience. It's both mental health resilience and also climate resilience. So, the main purpose is to co-create capacity building and leadership programs with youth so that they can address or they can handle climate change and mental health crisis better. So very exciting project. My next question, can this salutogenic model reframe the way we approach physical activity and population health? And just to briefly go through how salutogenic model of health can be applied to physical activity and what kind of benefit do we have. It introduces the growing need to shift from risk deficit-based to strength-based models in health research. And as we face complex challenges like climate change, rising mental health concerns, and excessive use of social media, we need frameworks that emphasizes health potential and resilience, not just risk reduction. So, similar idea that Dr. Byun has presented just now. And it offers a new perspective. What is the power of physical activity in supporting the health and well-being of humans and the planet and the entire ecosystem that we are being part of as humans? So what is this salutogenic environment for us? Why this shift matters in a time of global challenges, I think salutogenesis, it aligns with contemporary holistic health paradigms like One Health, planetary health, and also frameworks. So that includes United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Bangkok Declarations, and WHO's Global Action Plans for Physical Activity. It also invites us to reimagine physical activity as a pathway to tackle global challenges, potentially via a sense of coherence. It also reframes physical activity as a tool for thriving, not just surviving. So it encourages to think about joy, autonomy, resilience, community, connection, rather than physical health, increasing physical fitness. So research implications, it shifts focus from meeting guidelines, so the prevalence of meeting physical activity guidelines, to making the way we live, work, move, and play more meaningful. I think it also shifts performance metrics from only physical outcomes to enhanced psychosocial outcomes such as self-efficacy, agency, resilience, and connection. And in health research, those variables have been included in the equation as a mediator or a moderator. But now we can, frame it as the important outcomes. So the example that I can think of, in a mixed method study of bike to school programs, students report feeling more in control of their routines, so that's manageability, and proud of their independence and sustainable actions, so that's meaningfulness. And of course, there are challenges in thinking about, okay, how can I apply salutogenesis into physical activity research? I would say there are no immediate or visible gains, and there's no validated metrics, I don't think. So how can we really measure, and I know that there's a sense of coherence measures, but, I think validation has to be done first, and then we can either use or create something else, some kind of health index, before we actually apply. And I think it requires tender loving care, little TLC. It needs for political will and policy actions before individual level innovations. I think it's a bit dangerous to intervene at the individual level at this point because of because of my next point. Is it still individualistic? Is it still decontextualized? So is it empowering, or is it just being neoliberal, another neoliberal idea? And, oops. Can you still see? Okay, that's good. Okay, it turned off here, so I'll go here. Yeah.
Fingerprint.
What was my last point? Yeah, and my last point, it's everyone can relate to salutogenesis. Like when I think about salutogenesis, I'm like, oh, I think I'm doing this already. Like this makes sense. Yeah, of course, like sense of coherence, it's awesome. And and I'm sure everyone in the room can kind of relate salutogenesis into your work, and I think that's because salutogenesis, the model, is so broad, right? It's so broad. It's very hopeful. It's very idealistic. But does that mean, we can apply into what we do in research and practice? So there's that question that's still, that's still lingering inside in my brain. Yes, thank you. So finally, opportunities and potential research questions. I'll just present two. So if you look at the figure, I try to situate where I can fit in a sense of coherence and salutogenic idea. So the main principle will be the same, moving beyond a narrow biomedical pathogenic focus in understanding health, but focus on the sense of coherence. So how does regular physical activity influence an individual's sense of coherence across the lifespan? And also, is a sense of coherence a mediating mechanism through which physical activity enhances mental health and resilience? So not just physical health outcomes, but mental health and resilience, all the keywords that are becoming more and more important nowadays. I made a slight change to the wording, but it takes a village and a visionary coalition to build a salutogenic environment. And again, I think rather than intervening at the individual level, I think it's more important to make a environment more salutogenic, and then we can think about equity, accessibility, equality, etc. So that's my presentation for today. I thank my funders and also the organizations that really provided me the environment that I can flourish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, for that excellent presentation, giving us lots to think about. And so we, once again, we're holding questions to the end of this session. We will now move to our final speaker, and we have slides, which is great. So we will now move to our final speaker, Dr. John Spence from the Department of Kinesiology, Sport and Recreation at the University of Alberta in Canada. And the title of Dr. Spence's talk is Reflection on the Salutogenic Model of Health Promotion.
Thank you. And thanks to the organizers for putting me after a former doctoral student of mine who probably has just kicked my butt in terms of setting a standard for the presentation, but that's also pleasing to see. So I'll say now for something a little bit different. It's been all fun and everybody's embracing and loving the notion of salutogenesis. I'm going to be taking a bit of a critical perspective, and I'm taking a critical perspective from a post-positive stance on theory. So the epidemiologist in the room, the other quote-unquote scientists here, many of the social scientists here, you operate in a similar worldview where there's an assumption about what role theory plays for us. Theory is basically a representation of what we think reality is. And then we attempt to find out about reality by testing against that theory. So from a post-positivist or scientific method point of view, we're trying to understand our theory and hold it to a certain standard. So that's what I'm going to apply here today. But first of all, does this work? In Canada, it's common now for us to do something called a territorial acknowledgement. And this relates to our indigenous peoples, so our First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, because many of our institutions, our entire cities, are based on traditional lands. So these are lands of these first peoples. And so the University of Alberta is located on the lands of 3 different treaties. So this is a territorial acknowledgement from the University of Alberta. So specifically, the University of Alberta, its buildings, labs, and research stations are primarily located on the territory of the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Stoney, Dene, Iroquois, and Ojibwe Saulteaux lands that are now known as part of Treaties 6, 7, and 8, and homeland of the Métis. The University of Alberta respects the sovereignty, lands, histories, languages, knowledge systems, and cultures of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit nations. And not only is this being said in terms of respect for those individuals, but I think in the context of our discussion around saltogenesis and this take on health not being solely about disease, a much broader perspective on health, we could definitely look to our indigenous peoples who would, I would say, have somewhat of a similar perspective in that health is much broader than, for instance, the absence of disease. So I find this very relevant for us. Okay. So a little while ago, I looked after a bunch of animals. I was looking after a hobby farm. So this is a farm where the animals are there not necessarily for harvesting and for producing meat and eggs and so forth for us to consume. This is an interest or a hobby of the owners of this farm. And I looked after it for 1 week. And there were approximately 50 animals there, including 8 dogs, 10 geese, 3 pigs, 4 rabbits, but one of them had a litter, so there was probably about 10 rabbits. There were 3 cats, 2 of them had litters of kittens, 2 donkeys, and I'm probably missing something in there. So when I was walking around this farm, I asked the individual, the owner, I said, "What's this all about?" And he explained that he was in the military, he was in the Canadian Armed Forces, and he was in the Special Forces. And he saw, you know, he was in Afghanistan and he saw lots of military action. And he explained that this was about how he could deal with and enhance his mental health. So this farm and what he was doing there was a way for him to, in my interpretation, sort of mend his mental health. And so I reflected on this in relation to the saltogenesis theory and notion of, for instance, sense of coherence. Because, believe me, there were many chores. Feeding those animals, providing water for them, other things. Oh, and by the way, there were 10 ducklings that hatched while I was there too. So I think maybe 60 animals now. But yeah, particularly something like manageability. There was very regimented, there were lots of tasks to do throughout the day. They were expanding their farm, building new pens. And so, yeah, I was thinking about that, oh yeah, this, in the context of this theory, I could see perhaps what was going on. Similarly, my own experience there, my sense of coherence, let's say, in terms of manageability, comprehensibility, and my motivations was definitely challenged, but perhaps because of my previous life experiences, I was able to juggle all of my experiences there. So now I just got to make sure I've got this under there. No, I'm going to keep messing up just my movement. So as I mentioned at the outset, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I think about saltogenic theory. The paper by Antonovsky has that in its title, and I want to just explore where we're at with theory in this quote-unquote theory. Now, I mentioned also that I'm coming at this from a post-positivist point of view, specifically in the context of science. Science consists of two things, the broad term science. There's both a body of knowledge, your textbooks, Justin's neuroanatomy text sitting on in his shelf in his office, and also the method, the scientific method, which is the process by which we employ of gaining knowledge about the world, and specifically finding out about for that reality that we propose is out there. Jaccard and Jacobi describe this as a conceptual realm and an empirical realm. The conceptual realm is that body of knowledge, but that also includes the constructs, concepts, and theory about what's going on. And then the empirical realm is us going to test that. So that's where theory sits, is in both camps there, both in terms of a body of knowledge, but then it is the mechanism via which we are going and doing our testing. So our theories provide us hypotheses, for instance, that we test. So what are some of the criteria for a good theory? It should be logically consistent internally, so the various little boxes and arrows that you may see in a theory, do they make sense in how they're proposed to relate to one another? They should be in agreement with known data and facts. They should be testable and refutable. And specifically, if we look at what Karl Popper tells us about theory, we have to attempt to falsify our theory. So that may sound a little strange to us, but that means that we are going to challenge our theory, and to test it, we have to be willing to falsify it, meaning to show that it's not working. It's not working the way the theory proposes it is. Because Popper argues that we will never know the truth, even when confronted by it. So we have to continually attempt to falsify. A good example is Barry Marshall. Early 1980s, he proposed that peptic ulcers were caused by bacteria, H. pylori bacteria. The first paper he submitted was rated by all of the reviewers of that journal as one of the worst papers ever submitted to that journal. 20 years later, he won the Nobel Prize in Medicine, 2005. He was going against a prevailing theory that ulcers were caused by stress and sort of a mechanical problem in our stomachs as opposed to a common bacteria. And so that was conventional thinking, guided practice for tens and tens of years. It took over 20 years for his work to be accepted. And that would be an example of falsifying a theory. Stated in terms that can be understood and communicated to other scientists. Parsimonious. So the idea here is that if we can explain something with 3 constructs, why do we have 25? Or why should we go with a theory that gives us 25 explanations for the same thing? It should be a good generator of research activity, and it should be a fertile source of new ideas. Now, I've highlighted a few here. 2 in red I'm going to speak more to. When I think about the saltogenesis theory, we've definitely heard over the past 2 days that it's a fertile source of new ideas, including the establishment, perhaps, of a center here. And it's perhaps a good generator of research activity. Depending on what you look in the literature, they're decrying the fact that there hasn't been much research or uptake in certain disciplines, so the school may be still out there. Okay, and secondly, I'm going to use some of that criteria. Secondly, I'm going to make a distinction between frameworks, theories, and models. So frameworks are part of a sort of a theory, a thinking about theory, but they identify a set of variables and the relations among them that are presumed to account for a set of phenomena. But we're sitting at a fairly general level, and they may not describe all of the relationships or even generate hypotheses per se. Theory is much more dense, logical, coherent, and it is at the point where we're seeing hypotheses as well as how the variables may covary. And then a model is even more specific than theory. It's something that you may draw out to help you test your theory. So this is what I'm going to use in describing what I see, but it may be unfair to apply it to a theory that was proposed 10 to 20 years before then. So you can criticize me for that after. So when I look through the literature, even Antonovsky himself was confused or wasn't sure what he had. In that I see model being applied to saltogenesis, theory, orientation. Marguerite yesterday mentioned that, and or an approach, a framework, a concept, or even a perspective. So we're not seeing a universal uptake of the term theory being applied here. And in fact, those individuals like Bauer and Middlemark, who have spoken a lot to saltogenesis, they tend to resort more to model than theory. So that's one interesting thing to me, that there's not a clear identity around what saltogenesis is. Second, and Marguerite presented, this was the sort of the real first articulation. Again, you don't really need to take anything out of it, except there's a lot of arrows, a lot of constructs, and a lot of explanations how everything relates. A more simplified version of this, similar to, again, what was presented yesterday, suggests to us where sense of coherence sits relative to these life experiences and our resilience resources relative to whether we're successful in being able to move along that continuum. So I'm going to apply now and revisit parsimony and testable and refutable, because these are two areas where I struggle when I look at saltogenesis. And even the own writings of individuals who are big believers or supporters of saltogenesis. So for instance, there's a recognition that there's many elements, sub-elements connected by 18 relationships, making it difficult to apply in research and practice. Antonovsky himself did not pursue empirical testing of the whole, quote-unquote, very complex model. And then more recently, out of a systematic review, the authors were saying it's necessary to reach a consensus that defines the minimal characteristics that a saltogenic intervention should follow. So they're saying it's difficult to operationalize the theory or model because, again, there's so many moving parts in it. So it would struggle on a parsimony criteria, and it may not be testable and refutable because there's so many moving pieces in it. Secondly, and going back to this notion of falsifiability specifically, I get very anxious when I see something like what Middlemark and Bauer say, that Antonovsky was hoping to see this in the ascendant position as the theory of health promotion. There cannot be the theory. Think about the example I gave with Barry Marshall and the peptic ulcers and the bacteria. There was the theory at that time, and it was a stress-related model as opposed to a bacteria-related model. So we should always push back on when it becomes the theory. And then when I look at some of the reviews that have been done, they even mentioned the term Flensburg and Madsen talk about how the hypothesis was falsified specifically around the relationship between sense of coherence and physical health, based on evidence up to that point. Now, that's a bit of an outdated review, but it's one example of where they were saying they were falsifying the theory. And then now, sense of coherence. Specifically here, there are a few things when I look across commentary around sense of coherence. There's still some confusion as to whether SOC or SOC serves as a moderator, a mediator, or even a dependent variable. At times, Antonovsky said it could be a dependent variable. So that meaning that that's all we're trying to achieve is some enhanced sense of coherence. I guess the assumption being that that was then going to relate to health. The model or the theory, the way it's depicted now, it would be that it's a mediator for sure in the way it's depicted. But I actually would lean more to it probably being a moderator. The construct validity on the SOC scale is questionable. For instance, Antonovsky proposed it was unidimensional, but in fact, most of the factor analyses and so forth have been done with the scale show that it's multidimensional. So that's something that needs to be pushed and revised. Also, Antonovsky had proposed that sense of coherence was fairly stable and set by, at latest, early adulthood, but the subsequent research shows that it tends to increase with age over the lifespan. So these would be some findings that would challenge the construct validity, perhaps of the measure, or even the conceptualizing around sense of coherence. And then, as I showed before, at least in one of the reviews, there didn't seem to be much linked to physical health, much more linked to psychological or kind of emotional well-being than on the physical side. Okay, so where does this leave us? Applying the criteria that I stated before, it's definitely not a model. It's not operating at that very sort of localized level, and doesn't satisfy key criteria for quote-unquote good theory. And the language of Glanz-Reimer, it would be more of an explanatory theory, if anything, but not a theory of change, per se. Could be a framework, and in fact, that language is used by some authors when they're talking about it. For instance, Garcia, Moya, and Morgan, very useful as an overarching framework, which provides general direction for practice. And that's the way I've seen it actually spoken to throughout much of the presentations here, is more on that level. And then I would say maybe even best described as an orientation, the notion of the salutogenesis versus pathogenesis. I'd say important contributions from it are things like the focus on health as opposed to disease, the continuum, and sense of coherence is potentially a theoretic construct, but I'm not sure about the theorizing around it. And then just finally, in conclusion, Eun Young just mentioned the Ottawa Charter at the beginning of her presentation. I have no doubt, or I would be very surprised if Antonovsky was not present in Ottawa when the Ottawa Charter was drawn up at the conference, because the Ottawa Charter places emphasis on health outside of disease. It focuses on how the conditions in which will foster health, but it's not focusing on disease prevention per se. And I think that that's a very useful framework for us to also consider. So finally, I'll say thank you and look forward to our discussions.
So we'd now like to invite the three presenters along with Dr. Pike to the stage for a brief Q&A panel discussion.
Healthy intellectual debate when we can have a friendly criticism of the topic of the conference to inspire our discussion further. So I open the floor to questions. I'm happy to get us warmed up as chair. So I think one of the things that has come out with respect to salutogenesis is sort of, maybe there's a little bit of tension from a public health approach versus an individual approach. So particularly Young, but maybe then if others want to comment where you see that situated. You talked about that a little bit in your presentation, but do you see that sort of either salutogenesis or sense of coherence in particular being able to be sort of applied at a more population or public health level?
Yeah, so based on Dr. Byun's presentation, I think sense of coherence can be applied at the organizational level, and that'll make more sense, because when we talk about sense of coherence, it's at the individual level, and it's about manageability, comprehensibility. Like, those are the things that are not equal to everyone from the beginning. Some have worse experiences, some are overloaded, some have more stressors than others. So I don't think we can just apply the sense of coherence to everyone equally, but at the organizational level, interventions and policy actions, I think it can be applied, but I guess it's the matter of how we can apply comprehensibility at the organizational level. And I'm sure you can talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah, I liked your answer, and thank you for the nice question from the chair for the session. Basically, I think listening to the two presentations in this session, excluding my presentation, I realized that it's interconnected, and also I realized that I utilized the terms like a perspective or framework in explaining the approach to tackle the problems at the governance level for using the salutogenesis perspective. So that's the power of the salutogenesis, but one thing we can utilize from the perspective is also the sense of coherence, and there's a psychological factors that we can use. So there are some key components that we can utilize, not just for the individual levels, but also like a policy or macro level analysis. But the problem is if we want to just push the idea at the top level, like a macro level for the nice catchy phrase to change the policy, there's a limited applicability into actual and the real life situation. So in advancing the idea as a team at Yonsei, I think it's important to having a multiple perspective, not just for the individual levels, but we need to think about macro and the major level analysis to apply the concept to the situation.
If we go in the assumption that saltogenesis is operating at the framework or orientation level, then we could have other more specified theory operating at the next level to help us see how does it impact individuals, but how we can still operate at the level that the Ottawa Charter, for instance, would have us doing. So I don't see they necessarily have to be at odds. But to the extent that it does bring us down to the individual, as Young was saying, then we're in this little bit of at odds with some of the philosophy that I would say the underlying philosophy for saltogenesis, which is this more positive health take. And even one of, I think it's Middlemark and Bauer, talk about how, or maybe Bauer, that the continuum is still more pathogenic and negative, and the focus on the stressors and role of stressors, where they've argued there needs to be a positive health continuum take. So that's an interesting thing too, that I think would then tap into aspects of leisure and more positive well-being.
Questions from the audience? There's a microphone coming.
First of all, thank you for all presenting. So I have a question for John. If salutogenesis is more on orientation than a testable theory, how can it still meaningfully guide empirical research or health interventions?
So yeah, good question. That's where I would say you would have to minimally generate a model that you would then test that could still be consistent with what I would say would be more of the underlying philosophy of saltogenesis. So the idea of the health continuum and sort of avoiding the pathogenic take, but have a model that has some clear testable relationships, for instance, that you could operate with. And whether that being using some other existing one or there's an attempt to, define that yourself. I think that's what would be necessary with it. But as I said, many of the discussions or presentations I've heard over the last 2 days have been sort of operating at that, orientation level, like your presentation and some of the ones I saw yesterday were there. It's, we're buying into this notion of saltogenesis, but at the theory level, that's where I would see it falling down without some more work with that on it.
Thank you for 3 excellent presentations. I really enjoyed all of them. I've got a question for Jinsu. When you were talking about the safe sport policies, and you showed it in different countries, how they've been, sort of presented. I was wondering again if the athletes themselves were involved at any level. If they participated in designing these safe sport. You mentioned the scandal of the US gymnastics. Were any gymnasts involved? Did they ask their opinions? Did they participate in designing that safe sport policy? I was just interested to know.
Yeah, thank you for the great question. Actually, with my student, I'm conducting several studies on the safe sport policies because that's the new concept in the field of sports, not just in Korean context, but also the other nations. However, the key problem in the safe sport policies is to connect the policies from before the safe sports, like a discourse or communication, what we had before the safe sport initiatives. And the recent changes is to include anyway. They want to interact with the athlete to develop the policies for protecting the athlete. However, in Korean context, I don't know, compared to the other nations, there's a limited discussion about how we're gonna include the voices from the athlete. So depending on the social cultural environment, in the sports sector across the nations, there's a different levels of engagement of the athlete at this point. So that's the strengths of the salutogenesis approach to give them a power and to provide the resources to understand their needs and their challenges in being a part of the policy framework at this point. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a bit familiar with the Canadian context.
I want to ask
And there was a committee that was struck, a government committee, where they took sought testimonials from athletes, but it did not have the official title of a tribunal. And the athletes were pushing for it to be a tribunal because as soon as it goes to a tribunal, there's certain requirements that kick in and other aspects of evidence and then actions that would be taken from it. So there was great resistance for it becoming a tribunal, but then they acquiesced on that. The extent to which the athletes' input will be sought on the policy per se, I'm not clear on whether that's happening apart from those testimonials.
Yeah. Keep the mic. I want to ask you a thing
Okay.
now. Thank you very much for your analysis of whether or not it's a theory.
Yeah.
I found it very, very interesting. And also, what I was saying yesterday about the fact that the full salutogenic model of health is barely used.
Yeah.
And you've explained why.
Yeah.
Too many 18 relationships or whatever. Do you have any people are, in the global working group, people are working on, first of all, the SOC scale. They're trying to improve that. And we are working with these things because we do also realize that. But do you have any advice? You mentioned that we need clear, testable relationships in answer to the previous question. But anything else that you could advise us to move forward with this?
One would be, leave it at the framework level, and that the sort of the philosophy that's behind it. And we saw a good example of this yesterday. I can't remember the presenter's name, but the individual from psychology, the developmental psychologist, you commented on her presentation too. I could see her pulling in the constructs from other types of measures, but they were consistent with the notion of comprehensibility or so forth. And that would be a way to potentially do that. But yeah, I think the sense of coherence needs to be revisited with rigor in terms of the validation of, have a scale, because you mentioned there were 66 translations of it yesterday. There are also, quote unquote, I can't remember written in there, what they say, many or multiple versions or alternate versions of it. So multiply that by the 66 translations. I wonder if the, Hindi version of the scale is even representing at all the construct it's supposed to be if it's on an alternate version in a translation, right? So I think that construct needs to be revisited and with some rigor for sure. And then yes, identifying other existing theories or models that would operate that wouldn't be inconsistent. For instance, one that I thought of immediately was self-determination theory. Self-determination theory is a theory of well-being. It has a positive focus. It places it, there's a challenge in there on whether we're more externally or internally motivated. The externally motivated not necessarily being successful, and perhaps there might be well-being, sort of negative well-being effects related to that. So that could operate under a framework of saltogenesis, in my opinion, and it's well articulated as an example. Yeah.
I can also add to that. So there's also competing theories, and that's part of the salutogenesis. So for example, Bandura's self-efficacy theory is part of salutogenesis. Then why would he use salutogenesis instead of well-established, well-used, well-tested Bandura's self-efficacy, right? And how self-efficacy relates to one of the components of three, sense of coherence, and what are the correlations? Are they highly correlated? Then is it self-efficacy or is it meaningfulness or manageability? So I think we also need to test concurrent validity with other established theories to be able to really push forward the salutogenic model.
Okay, so to avoid going further over time, we'll stop here. This was an excellent question and answer session, and if you have questions that you weren't able to ask, I believe there is a break now, and so you can approach our panel members. So thank you again to all of the speakers in this session.
We'll take a short coffee break right now. We'll come back at 10:35. right now is our fifth session, the final of the symposium. We're going to have Dr. Jio Che introduce herself before bringing up the three presenters. Dr. Che, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing. I'm an epidemiologist researching health behavior among populations. So it is my pleasure to chair this final session where we will explore the applications of salutogenic principles in various health contexts, with a particular focus on policy, global mental health, and cancer survivorship. First, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Marguerite from the University of Bergen, Norway. Again, she gave a great perspective talk yesterday, and today's her title is Salutogenesis in Policy and Social Determinant of Health. Thank you.
Hello again. Right, so the topic I've been given today for today's talk is social determinants and policy. And what we are really moving on to now is a more collective level of looking at the sense of coherence. So first of all, I want to say a little bit about that, the collective level, because we've been looking very much at the individual level. And then a little bit about social determinants of health, how they might fit into the salutogenic model of health, and then something about policy making. So the collective perspective, when we're looking at social determinants of health, and you know this has been defined by the WHO as the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age, and people's access to power, money, and resources. So most often, these social determinants of health are related to social inequalities and how we can deal with those inequalities to give everybody better health rather than just those who have power and money. And then when we're looking at policies, they are challenges, it's where we have to make collective decisions about challenges at societal level. So what we're doing is we're really moving up a level now from the individual, maybe to the community, but really even higher than that to all of society. So collective thinking. Now what did Antonovsky say about collective sense of coherence? He was a sociologist. Sociologists deal with society, okay, a much higher level than just the individual. And he wrote quite extensively on the SOC as a group property in his 1987 book. He had the whole section on the SOC as a group property. But he himself questioned whether a collective could have a common worldview. If you think of how he defines sense of coherence, okay, it's a global orientation on life. Now, can a collective, can society, or can a community have a collective worldview? And he didn't think they could. So he was, so he sort of doubted about whether there could be a group sense of coherence. But then he said, when you look at it from the side of the stresses, the collective stresses can only be dealt with by a collective. So he was quite confused. He didn't think we could have this collective orientation, but he did think that collective stresses should be dealt with collectively. And it's very interesting because he himself went on to work out a family sense of, a sense of family coherence, okay, with a couple of other authors, in fact with his PhD student, Shifra Segi, who is now well into her 80s. But still very active in this field. And then Shifra Segi, and somebody had mentioned her in the talk yesterday, they had a quote from her. So Shifra Segi and Adi Mana, both Israelis, have taken this further, this collective concept. And they've looked at a sense of community coherence. And they've even gone up to a sense of national coherence. But the only way that they can operationalize this is by summing up individual sense of coherence. So they ask individuals, and they sum up that, and then they say, this is the community and this is the national sense of coherence. And because of the conflict in Israel, as I mentioned yesterday, they're very much talking about this in-group collective sense of coherence or community coherence, and the same attitudes and worldviews apply only to the in-group. Even at a national level, they have to distinguish between the populations within Israel. So we have a bit of difficulty with this, taking this up to the collective level. It doesn't stop us trying, okay? There are many, many people, and I'm going to quote a chapter by Ruka Maas and colleagues, especially when it comes to policy, and she is really, really active in this field of trying to establish a collective sense of coherence. Okay, so Antonovsky said, when we face collective stresses, we need to deal with them collectively. And what we have in the world today is what we call wicked problems. They're hard to define, they're dynamic, they keep changing. They're interconnected, they're complex, and they're impossible to solve. So we have these collective stresses. We've heard about climate change and planetary health. We've heard about conflicts in different areas of the world, and a new one now between India and Pakistan. These conflicts just don't go away. And the one that the social determinants of health deal with is the social inequality, okay? Because that means that people have different levels of health. There's a gradient. People who have access to power and money have much healthier lives, and people who don't have access have worse health. And this leads to, these inequalities have implications. It leads to increased crime, unemployment, social division, exclusion, and distrust. And what tends to happen, because this is a wicked problem, what tends to happen is governments try to deal with crime and separately try to deal with unemployment. So your Ministry of Employment will be dealing with that side, while the police department will be dealing with crime. So we put them in silos and we deal with them separately. A little bit what Young was saying earlier, we don't have the connection between them, and Jinsu was saying the same, I think. So we attempt to tackle them separately, but that fails to deal with the underlying problem. And perhaps looking at a collective sense of coherence, or looking at it through the framework of sense of coherence, we might be able to see a way forward. First of all, social determinants of health. This figure comes from the CDC, okay? And they identify 5: education, and that means access and quality of education, likewise for healthcare, neighborhood and built environment, social and community context, and economic stability. So these are the non-medical things that contribute to health, okay? Non-medical issues that contribute to health. I mean, do they remind you a little bit of some of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals? There's one for education, there's one for health, there's one for cities, in neighborhood and built environment, they link up a little bit. There's also one for poverty, so economic stability would link there. These social determinants of health can be linked. There's that model again, the simplified salutogenic model of health. And that first section is really to do with the social determinants of health. If you think about the definition, the place where we are born, we live, we play, we age, we work, okay? Those things are all there. There they are in our life situation. And the stresses arise when we don't have enough income, or we don't have a stable income, if we don't have access to health, if we don't have good quality education. So those 5 things identified by the CDC can be causes of stresses. They can undermine they can cause us to have overload and possibly undermine our health. However, you also have generalized resistance resources. So people who do have access to health, good quality education, these good income and so on, these are resources for health. So, and then of course we have the specific resources, which we haven't really mentioned much, but this is collective provision, most often by government, but sometimes by NGOs or other agencies within society. They also provide resources for very specific situations of stress. Okay, so that's just a brief thing about social determinants and how they fit with the salutogenic model. And moving on to policy now. So this is really, in a way, what Antonovsky was talking about, collective responses to collective problems. So we need coherent policies. It's a good term, and it comes from, it links with social sense of coherence, okay? It's a good way of thinking about things. The OECD, and South Korea is a member of is one of the countries in the OECD, defines policy coherence as the systematic promotion of mutually reinforcing policy actions across government departments and agencies, creating synergies towards achieving the agreed objectives. So if better health, or if physical education could get up to the status, it needs it across the different ministries. It is not just for one ministry to be providing, better health or providing more physical education to achieve that. There needs to be coherence, coordination across the different departments. And certainly when countries introduce national health promotion policies, or even a ministry, or maybe a coordinator, that's the intention. Okay, healthy public policies implies all different ministries working together, coordinating coherence across them. And salutogenesis focuses on resources, as we saw in that picture with the social determinants of health, both GRRs and SRRs, to say, well, what are the resources available, or what are the resources that are needed? In particular the SRRs, what are the resources that are needed to help deal with these wicked problems? Societal conditions influence life experiences which shape individual sense of coherence. So, sorry, I thought it was, I'll come back to that statement. So this paper, this chapter by Maas, you can see the reference at the bottom there, they identify two distinct roles of salutogenesis in policymaking. And it uses different aspects of the salutogenic model of health. So the first one is the orientation, okay? How do we change the way we see the problems, or the way we see how they can be solved? So a problem-solving and resource focus orientation. But the second one is the way of organizing the relationship between upstream conditions and the three dimensions of the sense of coherence, to see if those can be strengthened. And I will deal with each of these two methods separately. So firstly, the global orientation. Basically, what you do here is you flip the question. Just like Antonovsky did, instead of what causes disease, what causes health, now you say, why doesn't, if you, instead of asking why doesn't it work, you now say, how can it work? What can we do to make it work? And the focus is on resources and their distribution. So if we're thinking of something like inequality, social inequality, how can resources be redistributed in order to meet people's needs and to make a fairer society? And then, well, one way is to focus on salutary processes and, very important, participatory approaches. Now, you've probably heard many of my questions have related to participation, okay, because this is the thing that really motivates people. If you take part in something, it really motivates you. Users, and research has shown that users often have a much more salutary focus than policymakers. So if you can involve them, if they can participate, they come up with solutions or the real needs in a much better way than policymakers do, who are a little bit removed. So we need policies for collectives as well as individuals. Okay, and I think we've heard that in this morning's talks as well. I'm sure you've seen this diagram before, but equality is when you give the same resources to everyone. So you can see the 3 people watching the match get 1 box. It doesn't solve the problem for the shortest person. Okay, they still can't see. Equity says what you do is you redistribute resources. Okay, so that the middle person still gets 1 box, but the shortest person gets 2, so that they can see. The tallest one doesn't need anything, so you don't give any resources to the tallest person. So this is a redistribution of resources. Now, the last one is social justice. And what has happened there, and this really does require policy, this can't be done by individuals, there it requires a change of the infrastructure. Instead of having a wooden fence, you've now got a metal fence that you can see through. You've changed the infrastructure. So really, when we're thinking at a policy level and we want to achieve justice, this is what we need to think about. How can we change the infrastructure so that people have access to fulfill their needs? So the second one that they identified, upstream conditions and dimensions of the link between the upstream conditions, which are essentially the social determinants of health, and the dimensions of the sense of coherence. So the link between the two is life experiences. So we've had this many times now. Consistency leads to comprehensibility. Load balance leads to manageability. Participation leads to meaningfulness. So how can policymakers create life experiences that strengthen SOC? And that is where policy needs to target. It needs to target life experiences. And then those feed into the dimensions of sense of coherence, which then enables people to move towards health. So again, the diagram. The previous one, we had the life situation and life cause stress and GRRs highlighted, but in this case, it's what's in between those upstream factors and the sense of coherence. Okay, those are the things that can be targeted. And Jung was talking about how can we make this focus when you've got all these competing interests. It's such a simple way to improve people's health, to increase physical activity. So if you think about it, how could you increase consistency about that? How could you get the message across? Or how could policy increase the consistency so that people comprehend, get out and do your physical activity for your health's sake? The load balance. We need to find out what people's needs are and what resources could supply those needs. That's what policy needs to tackle. Okay? So here in Seoul, you've got these fantastic paths along the little rivers that 2 of our colleagues from Canada have been running along in the mornings, and they all lead down to the big river, and there's also parks and pathways. There's the resource. Okay, you're providing a resource for people, but do people know about it? They've got a need to go out and exercise, but do they know about it? So, this is where you can attempt to affect the load balance, and then people can start managing their needs. And of course, participation, which I've stressed all along the way, extremely important. Ask people. Go back down to the lowest level. The people who are going to be using this, include them. Okay, that is so important. They know what they need. They often have solutions, maybe just not the finances or something to provide the resources that they need. But that participation is extremely important. So involve people in policy. So, yes, it's life experiences that link the social determinants of health and the dimensions of sense of coherence that can move people towards health. And The salutogenic policy approach will then focus on these life experiences, as I was giving that example. So that's really it. So the salutogenic approach sees the social determinants of health as the upstream societal conditions, life situation, okay, plus the stresses and resources that they generate. And then the policy focus should be linking those upstream conditions with the sense of coherence, and that is by tackling the life experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel. I'm very moved about the life expectation, experience, and SDOH link. Thank you. Next, we have Professor Atsuro Tsutsumi, a coordinator for mental health at the WHO Regional Office for the Western Pacific, and also professor at the Institute of Transdisciplinary Sciences for Innovation, Kanazawa University, Japan. His title, he will share his work on salutogenic approaches for global mental health issues. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Atsuro Tsutsumi. I had been the professor at Kanazawa University, but currently served as the regional advisor on mental health and substance use at WHO regional offices, WHO regional office for the Western Pacific, located in Manila, Philippines. I am responsible to oversee 33 countries and areas on the policy on mental health and other legislations on the mental health. Today, I'm very honored to speak with you about the critically important and the deeply human issues of mental health. We will examine the issue of suicide in Korea and Japan and explore how it connects with the global trends in mental health. We will approach this discussion using the concept of the saltogenesis perspective, that the focus is not only on treating the illness, but also on how to cultivate, sustain, and protect health. In the next few minutes, we will see statistics and structural factors and the global frameworks that surrounding suicide and mental health. Ultimately, we will ask the fundamental questions: how can people maintain well-being even in times of difficulties? And what can system learn from that? As you know, WHO is now very, very in difficult situation, with a potential withdrawal from the US. But I'm very happy now. Why? So this is for me the deeply the personal topic as a policy advisor, a researcher, and a parent. Saltogenesis means, I believe, that the origin of the health. It encourages the shift in focus from managing the diseases to creating health. Rather than asking how can we eliminate symptoms of illness, we ask how can people remain emotionally, physically, and mentally healthier. This approach is not just a theoretical. It has a practical implementations for symptom design, system designs, resource allocations, workforce development, and community engagement. In the current global mental health movement, saltogenesis complements the light-based approaches. Together, they push us beyond pathology and the diagnosis toward inclusion, recovery, and empowerment. Mental health does not exist in isolation. It lives in our schools, workplaces, homes, and the neighbors and communities. The Salutogenics reminds us that the resilience is not an exclusive trait, but a capacity that can be nurtured in everyone through connections, dignity, and meaning. So let's take a closer look at the current state of the suicide crisis. In 2023, the South Korea recorded the highest suicide rate among OECD countries, 27.3 per 100,000 population. Japan ranked among the top 5 with a rate of 15.6. For comparison, the OECD average is about 12.0, and the US rate is 14.0. The Korea's rate among the elderly, those aged 80 and over, is especially alarming, exceeding 60 per 100,000, and also young generations, and also the celebrities. In Japan, suicide is a leading cause of death among men aged 20 to 44 for the productive generations. These are not just the numbers, they are indicators of deeper structural problems. It seems strange, don't you think, that Korea, Japan is somehow economically developed. And also, we have a higher number of the psychiatrists per population compared to the other countries who have less rate of the suicide. Why? The weakening of the family support system, urban loneliness, the Seoul is now targeting to protect the isolation deaths for the elderly populations. And the intense academic and the job-related pressure and the lack of affordable, stigma-free mental health care are all factors. These are not issues unique to Japan and Korea. They represented a widespread erosion of the social connection across high-income societies. Even in economically advanced countries like Japan and Korea, people are struggling to find supportive relationships and a sense of purpose when facing hardship. That is where the fundamental challenges lies. So in Korea, as you may know, the suicide is now the leading cause of death among the people in their teens, 20s, and the 30s. It is a very sad thing, don't you think so? In Japan, the highest risk group is a working age men, ages 20 to 44, who are pressured to be economically successful, emotionally static, and silent about their struggles. The mental distress is often hidden and ignored until it becomes a crisis. Now, among Korean elderly populations, those aged 80 and over have especially high suicide rates, with over 60 deaths per 100,000 population. These are individuals who have lived full lives, yet now feel abandoned, isolated, and burdensome. This age-specific data now reveals a common thread that people of all ages are falling through the cracks. Not because they are weak, but because the system meant to support them do not exist. We need a system that go beyond treatment to prevent despair and foster meaningful human connection through the life plan. So even from the global perspective, the need to strengthen the mental health, the system is urgent, yet investment remains insufficient. In most countries, the less than 2% of the health budget are allocated to mental health. This underfunding is both cause and the consequences of societal neglect. It results in inadequate services, limited outreach, and the shortage of trained professionals. It also reflects the persistent stigma that mental health is still not recognized as a public good. Institutionally, the most systems remains centered around the hospitals and the clinics and the biomedical care and the treatment. This model tends to isolate patients and then neglect the social and environmental factors that shape mental health. In many parts of the world, the human rights abuses persist, including the forced hospitalizations, involuntary treatment, and the lack of consent. These practices often deepen trauma rather than promote healing. WHO calls for the transition to community-based and life-respecting and inclusive care and treatment. Salutogenicis complement this shift, emphasizing the health growth from relationships, the meaning and the safety, not just from the medication. We don't just need more services, we need better systems that prioritize the dignity, inclusions, and well-being. Let's compare how Japan and Korea, the two countries facing the similar challenges, have responsible difficulty. Japan has long relied on inpatient psychiatry. It has the highest number of the psychiatric beds per capita globally. Hospital stays are long. The average the hospital stay in Japan is more than 1 year. And discharge planning is often insufficient. The community-based alternatives are underdeveloped. Peer support remains rare, and the recovery-oriented approaches are not yet embedded at the national levels. In contrast, Korea, while still hospital-centric, is beginning to show the signs of change. As I said, the Seoul metropolitan government is actively addressing the lonely deaths through outreach and the monitoring programs of the elderly. The last week, delegates of the Seoul metropolitan government visited the WHO office to discuss this issue with us. However, both countries share the one persistent problem, stigma toward mental illness. It is often treated purely as a medical issue. And the families are left to carry the burden in silence. Access to affordable, the culturally appropriate, and the voluntary care remains limited. What both countries truly need are systems that help people to live with dignity, not just to survive. This includes preventive education in school, the family support programs, workplace mental health trainings, and safe spaces where youth can express themselves. We must move from the hospital-based care to community care ecosystem. Let me share the deeply personal story that made me reconsider mental health, not as a professional, as a father. My daughter, the name is Sakura, which means cherry blossom, had been bullied in elementary school since she had grown up in Malaysia, and she had a different experience from others. She wanted to go to the private school because she wanted to separate from the classmates. Then she studied very hard and passed a very competitive examination and joined one of the top private junior high school the last year. At one point, however, my daughter suddenly stopped going to school. We went to a psychiatrist and no diagnosis was made. However, my first instinct was to look for the cause and the reason and try to solve it. Was it anxiety, or because of the bullying, or the developmental issues? I approached it as a problem to fix. But the more I tried to intervene, the more distance grew between us. What I thought was helping many have felt like pleasure to her. I decided to stop trying to fix and not try to make her recover, and instead become someone she could trust. We began to studying Korean language together. From the beginning, aya oyo, aya oyo, oyu, oyui. Yeah, because she loves K-pops. We'll listen to music. Sometimes just sat in silence. At first, we said little, but over time, the music, the laughter, and even silence began to rebuild our connection. That we will take a topic, it's a language proficiency test of Korean language in July. In fact, she was not recovering yet in the clinical sense. She is not able to go into school yet, but she was reconnecting, and she will be becoming healthier, I believe. I began to see her not as someone to protect, but as a human being going through the struggle. This experience changed me. The mental health is not the things in clinics. It often grows in the acts, in patients, the presence and the love. In space where we don't need to explain ourselves. In a relationship, we ask, what's wrong with you? What matters to you? Salutogenisis gave me a language for this truth. The health is not merely the absence of illness, but the presence of connection, dignity, meaning, and hope. And this is what I want to cultivate, not just at home, but in our social system and in our national systems. As we've seen the mental health systems, especially in East Asia, like Korea and Japan, we are still based on the defect models. They began with the question, what's wrong? And seek to fix and manage people. But what we ask the different questions, what gives people strength? Where do they find meaning? Excuse me. This is the essence of the Salutogenesis. It shifts our focus from illness to well-being, from isolation to reconnection, from passive treatment to collaborative healing. The future of the mental health must include the focusing on the well-being, not only symptoms, the growth sector collaborations, partnership with the people with lived experience, and investing in community-rooted care. Finally, it's remember, the health is not something we give to people, it's something we grow together. Japan and Korea that stands at the crossroads. They are high, the suicide rates are unacceptable. We have the knowledge, the tools, and most importantly, the people who care deeply and are ready to act. The Salutogenesis provides a roadmap, not just to study, but to live in our homes, in our institutions, and in our global communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your great severe mental health problem related to societal status. Especially it's related to salutogenic view, such as building a positive and prevention well-being. Thank you for your presentation. Finally, we have Dr. Ji-Min from National Cancer Survivorship Center, National Cancer Control Institute, South Korea. Her title is Exercise as a Salutogenic Intervention for Cancer Patients.
Thank you for introductions. It is a great honor to present to this symposium. I truly appreciate Professor Jun for this great opportunity. Before I starting, I apologize because I'm not expert to salutogenesis this field, so I figure out I totally wrong concept about my presentation. So there are some mismatches for this topic. Please kindly understand it. Today, my presentation is titled Exercise as a Salutogenic Intervention for Cancer Patients. Here is an overview of the presentations. What is the cancer? Cancer is characterized by the abnormal growth of cells. Interestingly, one of the earliest recorded cases of cancer dated to around 16,000 BC, Egypt. In ancient time, cancer was referred to as karkinos, meaning crab in Greek, because tumors resemble crab with their extended legs. So what are the main characteristics of cancer? The first is their uncontrolled proliferation. The sound is not working. Okay. Please just, I'm so sorry. Okay. Actually, I have next two slides or in video. I apologize. Second, invasion and metastasis to other tissue and organs. And just skip it. And third, angiogenesis. As you can see in this video, cancer cells develop their own nutrition supply to promote rapid division and growth. We call this process angiogenesis. And this is vessel, and that is tumor. It's growth. The last key characteristic is that cancer is heterogeneous. Even within the same cancer type, tumor characteristics such as differentiations and malignance vary, resulting in different treatment strategy and prognosis. Because of this trait, more than 3,000 years since the first recognized of cancer, it still remains one of the most common chronic diseases today. In Korea, the number of cancer cases has steadily increased. Over the past 2 decades, cancer has remained the leading cause of death. As life expectancy rises, cancer incidence among the elderly is also increasing. The top 3 most common cancers in Korea are thyroid, colorectal, and lung cancer. The cancer survival rate also has improved, reaching 72.9%. As a result, there is an increasing population of cancer survivors who require long-term monitoring and health management. Currently, 5% of Korean population are cancer survivors, comparable to the population with disability. Among them, long-term survivors, it means that over 5 years post-diagnosis make up 61.3%. They represent the largest portion of the cancer survivorship population. Then, is exercise beneficial for cancer? Can exercise provide salutogenic effect for cancer patients? To answer this, we must consider the timing within the cancer care continuum, as the effect of exercise may differ depending on phase of treatment or recovery status. According to a meta-analysis, physical activity before and after diagnosed cancer is negatively associated with all-cause mortality risk. Even light exercise, such as walking on treadmill at 4 km per hour for 30 minutes 4 times a week, can reduce mortality by 30% of cancer diagnosis. Then, is it okay to exercise after being diagnosed with cancer, but before starting first treatment? Doesn't exercise boost metabolism? Would that make cancer grow? In a breast cancer mouse model, volunteer exercise was shown to overexpress the THSD7B genes, which inhibit tumor growth and metastasis, enhance immune functions, and ultimately reduce tumor size. Cancer treatment is typically a combination of surgery, chemo, radiation, and hormone therapy, depending on tumor size, lymph node involvement, and metastasis. Surgery is the primary treatment aimed at complete and partial tumor removal. Even with improved surgical methods, post-operative complications remain an issue. Especially, shoulder dysfunction is one of the most prevalent surgical complications. Then, could an evidence-based exercise program help breast cancer patients recover shoulder functions? To answer this, we conduct a randomized control trial with breast cancer patients immediately after surgery. Starting from post-operative day 1, participants receive 4 personalized exercise sessions over the 3 weeks, coordinated with outpatient visit. They are given customized exercise based on shoulder function assessment. After a month, 69.7% of participants in exercise group recovered shoulder strength compared to pre-surgery levels, while only 3.6% of control group did. Even after 6 months, the exercise group maintained better shoulder flexibility and strength. This study demonstrated that early evidence exercise can accelerate recovery shoulder function. And also, about 5 to 12 patients undergoing chemotherapy for gynecology or colorectal cancer experience severe peripheral neuropathy. Symptoms including numbness, tingling, or reduced strength in hand and feet. Could exercise help relieve these symptoms? Although research is very limited, but a recent meta-analysis suggests that exercise positively impact symptoms of CIPN. In addition, many patients also experience brain fog during chemotherapy. Previous studies that have shown that exercise increases BDNF, prevent cortical thinning, and enhance neuroplasticity, thereby improving memory. And what about after treatment end? Actually, it also video, is it okay? I'm sorry. Okay, just try to. I'm sorry. Yeah. This video explains what is meaning for telomere length and definition, what is meaning for what association with aging with telomere length. I'm sorry. Even after active treatment, exercise continues to bring various physical and psychological benefits. Telomere length, a marker of aging, is one such factor associated with exercise. It's okay? Okay. In breast cancer, the Wnt beta-catenin pathway is directly linked to reduced risk and telomere shortening. Could exercise suppress this pathway, prevent the risk of recurrence, and help preserve telomere length? In fact, compared to matched health control, breast cancer survivors showed higher body fat and WISP-1 and reduced WISP-3. They also had lower cardiorespiratory fitness and grip strength. In addition, a 12-week remote exercise intervention, the breast cancer survivor significantly increased telomere length and improved DNA copy number. This suggests that exercise may reduce recurrence risk and delay cancer-related aging. There are lots of countries recommend the physical activity guideline for cancer survivors. The general guideline is as follows. Most of guidelines recommend people who participate in enough physical activity, they expected lots of benefits as follows. Then, does exercise have same effect on cancer type? Unfortunately, strong evidence is mainly available for metabolically related cancers. For other type and treatment phase, more research is needed. Then, how can we build robust evidence in exercise oncology? To answer this, researchers must understand the broader spectrum experience associated with cancer and how exercise affects tumor biology, tumor microenvironment, and patients' well-being. It is also essential to study how exercise influences physiological, psychological, and social outcomes throughout cancer journey. Is exercise beneficial for cancer? These remain key core question for research fields in exercise oncology. Over the 2 decades, exercise oncology have grown in depth in evidence. I just searching for with ChatGPT, I asking for how about summarizing exercise oncology field, what is strength and limitation? After 1 minute, he make these images. Also, I think exercise is very important, and as a salutogenic tool, As I prepared this presentation, I came to believe that a more active life is a more salutogenic life. Exercise can be cancer survivor build physical, psychological, and social resilience beyond the recovery. Thank you for your attention.
Jimin, thank you for your clinical and research expertise in cancer rehabilitation and patient support.
So we'd now like to call all three presenters, along with Dr. Che, on stage for a brief Q&A panel discussion.
So we have a distinguished panel of experts providing fresh perspectives on how the salutogenic model can be integrated into healthcare and public health strategies. So now it is open for the discuss. Please share your insights and questions. Yeah, please.
Before question, thanks for our presenting. Those are very impressive presentation. So my question is to consider how we build the policy. I think we need to consider the real happening in recent society. So how can we consider the broader aspects and enlarge the scope of salutogenesis, like social dilemmas, like people became homogeneous and lack personal characteristic, and also the social norms or atmosphere where like emphasize what is acceptable rather than the real society, what the real is.
I'm afraid I didn't get that question.
Could you one more question. She couldn't get the point.
Could you summarize your question? And so you ask Dr.
So your presentations are focusing on how we build a policy within the salutogenetic aspects. And I personally think that to develop the policy, we need to consider the real society, like not only for the physical or psychological aspects, we need to consider more broader, like social or media aspects, like more broader ones. So how can we adapt this salutogenesis policy in like media or promoting people in political way like that?
This is a tough one. I mean, so you think what I was saying about building policy, it didn't relate to reality, and you want to know more about...
like how to applicate the salutogenetic norm and reality. So I think this concept is kind of tough for general people to understand, and to applicate and promoting the concept of salutogenic policy, I think we need to explain more easily and more friendly to people. So I just asking your personal opinion to how we treated people to accept the theme of salutogenesis and like more approaching for this one.
Yes, I mean, it is a matter of, you were mentioning social media. Well, it's you young people who have to do that. I've got no clue about those sorts of things. So, I think this is where, if we start teaching it at undergrad level or graduate level, and people become familiar with it, they'll find ways of spreading the knowledge in realistic ways, like using social media. I'm not sure if that answers what you were asking, but I mean, I think we need to do it collectively. And young people, what will reach other people. Make a TikTok video to reach other people about it. Yes, I'm afraid I haven't really answered the question. I don't know if either of you...
Yeah, and also the education is really important part of policy, and I wonder how salutogenic approach can be adopted in educational part to younger generation. Because I think when I listening to the presentation, I personally think I should have noted this theme before I getting more older, because my personal identity is already formed based on not salutogenic. So I think like, how can we spread this good theme or healthy identify motivation to younger generation?
Yes, in a way, it's a matter of changing social norms, isn't it? I think we've got to change how people perceive things. And how do you do that? I mean, how does one change social norms? I was very lucky to have a sabbatical in Canada at Simon Fraser University, where I was learning about restorative justice. And it's practiced in schools as well. And there they talk about proactive, where the base of the triangle, everybody receives some knowledge. And they use circle processes every day with small kids, little kids doing this. And it changes social norms. Okay, so people learn social skills. They learn to listen to each other. They learn to not repeat what's been said, but to build on that. So I think there are ways of changing social norms, and that's perhaps what we've got to think about, because you're right, we need to start thinking not what's wrong with us, but what can we do, or what's good for us. Another way, I think Indigenous thinking in Canada gives us a lot of directions that we can go in. And actually there's an Indigenous writer, she's actually from the States, not Canada, but she also talks about thinking about a gift economy instead of this neoliberalist market economy where everything's a commodity. And if you start seeing opportunities and things that you receive as gifts, so you completely change your norm, your way of looking at things, that starts to make you treat things differently. Okay, you treat things, if you see something as a gift, an opportunity as a gift, you're going to use that. Okay, so if we start thinking about activity, this is a gift that'll keep me healthy. Perhaps it could change things. It's gone way off the topic, I'm afraid, but I think we need to change social norms. Atsuro, you wanted to say something?
Am I right? I think you want to know somehow how we can implement the policy of the saltogenesis, because the saltogenesis is not the preventing the medicine, and then it is not the treatment and the diagnosis at the hospital. So of course always disease-related issue is under the Ministry of Health, and education is under the Ministry of Education, and also the sports and the physical activity might be sport agency of the specific ministry. So that always, the cross-cutting issue is challenging to be implemented. That's why it is quite the tough questions and far beyond in reality. But it is quite important to have the multi-sectoral approaches as a cross-cutting issue to make the people healthier. It is very easy to say, but actually many people are working on that, but still in the process of, the achieving. But, that we have to know about it. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentations. I really enjoyed all of them, and I especially know that policy change is kind of a difficult topic, especially for salutogenesis. But it's really inspiring, and I was especially kind of focused, or I wanted to ask a little bit more about salutogenesis and mental health, just because that's a topic of my interest as well. So I wanted to ask Professor Tsutsumi. So I was really touched by your personal story about your daughter. And I know like promoting salutogenesis on a community or even a policy level would be difficult. So maybe if we take it back to the individual level, what would you maybe suggest, or what are some maybe personal examples that you would be able to give to promote salutogenesis to the general public? Maybe like on a personal level from your personal experiences.
Thank you very much for your questions. It's very difficult to answer. If I know the answer, I can do it. But for the individual levels, I'm still struggling with my duties issues. But the schools are so supportive. The school teachers come often to my house and to see my daughter, but sometimes she refuses it. But this kind of, the provided messaging, that, the school is not denying her. That is very important. But for the public school, in Japan in particular, I don't know the situation in Korea, there are huge tasks, the huge workload in the public school compared to the private school. If the students are not going to the school, it will be ignored. Nothing to do, nothing to be done. Just say, okay, that's okay. But that is somehow one of the interventions. But sometimes, the students that feel that they are not accepted, that they are not paid attention. That's why, it is very little things, but that the provider, the frequent message to her, that is very important. And at the individual level. For the society level, there are so many interventions, but still not successful. So we have to, think about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for the Dr. Daniel. As for your topic about the life experience, like how we can create policy for the life experience, and think this, on one hand, we can create enough resource for them to choose from, like for some support from the society, from the financial support and so on. And another thing is, what I think is about creating an environment for like everybody can freely choose their way of life, because we cannot cover everything through the policy. So in your opinion, how can we create that kind of the social environment that make every people think that, okay, I am free enough to choose the way of life, which is also very important to the salutogenesis. And the second question is about from the very international perspective of creating this kind of salutogenesis to solve the kind of global issues, global problems. And given the current situation, where that even the globalization we are very proud of is being challenged from everywhere around the world, so who do you think and who will be recognized as the very privileged or the very recognized organization or the certain agency that will be taken or accepted by the global world to hold all the problems?
I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of difficulty understanding. I'm deaf and I wear hearing aids, and it's just very difficult for me to hear what you're saying. Could you just summarize in one sentence your question?
Yeah, so the first question is how we can make the policy for all the societies who believe that they are free to choose from the way they want to live and to like satisfy their life experience.
So a policy?
Yeah, policy for the freedom to choose a life they are satisfied from, or...
I still haven't got it. I'm so sorry. Can anyone interpret for me?
Like creating kind of the policy for everybody believe they are free to choose the life they are satisfied or the life they would like to have, which is also important.
Everybody in a country or in the world?
In the world, like...
I'm not sure that that's ever going to be possible, is it? Because we all have different needs and different desires. But I think if you tackle life experiences in policy, so the consistency, the load balance, and the participation, and then the sense of coherence, the comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness, those are the individual factors that grow out of that. So if you create collective consistency and provide resources where people have needs, and you allow people to participate and take part in making decisions, then at an individual level, I think there's a potential for their sense of coherence to be stronger, and that helps them to move towards health. So I think individuals still have to respond to the policies that have been created. Does that answer your question a bit?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry about the misunderstanding. Yeah.
I have a question for Dr. Min. Okay, so you summarize very nicely the importance of exercise for cancer survivor for different aspects. But other than exercise, what other lifestyle do you think is important for cancer survivors, preventing cancer recurrence and also improve their quality of life?
Thank you for wonderful questions. Actually, I have no idea right now, but I just starting what is exercise important in exercise oncology field. I just focus on them, but right now I have no idea. But I think the mindfulness is also important things because it depends on patients. Some patients, they are same stage and same treatment, even though same characteristics of cancer type. Some patients have resilience and recovery is very faster, and other is different. I focus on interviewer hers. She have a supportive caregiver is very supportive, and she's always happy, and she always thankful because I'm still alive. That is very important thing because we serve the same exercise interventions, the effect is different. So it is the right answer for your question, but I just think like that, yeah.
That's good. So then what in that aspect, you see some patient, they have a different attitude, or some people are more resilient to their situation and they recover faster. Then what is the role of an exercise interventionist or exercise therapist in that context?
I think how can we serve customized exercise interventions, not only exercise movement, and we have to think about their environment for exercise interventions and their psychological and physiological and social outcome. We have to consider about it. Yeah. Maybe, yeah.
The reason why I ask is that she did excellent work with her cancer patient. She cried with the patient when they cry. She empathized with them. I think that was a great motivation of many of your patients that you exercise them. And then you see the great result.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you so much. Yes.
I'd like to ask Dr. Daniel just a tiny question from kind of different perspective. First of all, I really appreciate your astonishing presentation both today and yesterday. I remember back to yesterday. I remember summarized key sentence. Currently, most studies focus on the SOC only, implying opportunities to develop SMH, Salutogenic Model of Health, and other aspects of theory. So I'd like to ask you, what would you recommend for kind of not just focusing on the SOC only, and to develop the full Salutogenic Model of Health other than policy making you presenting today? Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Let me just check that I've got this right. So yesterday when I mentioned the opportunities for developing the theory, for example, the salutogenic model of health wasn't much used. And now you want to know, other than policy, what,
yes.
how we could apply it, sort of thing. Well, I don't know if you remember yesterday as well when I went through all the different disciplines that make use of a salutogenic orientation in their studies. Basically anything. I think that if you've got a passion about something and you frame it in salutogenesis, I think that you will discover new ways of looking at the problem and new ways of solving an issue. I think the brilliance of Antonovsky was that he flipped the question. And if we can do that in the way that we view the issues that we're researching, can we ask a different question? It's a little bit like Socrates. He had his critical thinking, and he had these different questions about assumptions and evidence and so on. But the last question was questions about the question. Are we asking the right question? And I think Antonovsky showed us, flip the question, and you see something very different. And that makes it possible to deal with. So what is your particular area of research? What are you interested in?
I'm interested in kind of exercise medicine because I'm a PhD student in Justin's lab.
Any particular area of exercise medicine? I mean, are you dealing with a particular diagnosis like cancer, or are you dealing more broadly?
Cancer medicine.
Cancer, okay. I think you should answer. How can salutagenesis flip the question?
I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your questions. Could you repeat again for your questions?
I'm just wondering, in salutogenic approach, the most common thing, most studies focus on the sense of coherence only. But I just want to ask you, kind of more broader approach to salutogenic, other than policy making you guys present today, in terms of cancer medicine.
Actually, that is just Justin already question to me. I also no idea right now. Please give me 1 year. I'll best answer to you. Is it okay to you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Just one quick question to Professor Daniel. I have the sense of coherence is a great measure to. It's like, as far as I know, it's the only measure we can kind of assess salutogenesis. But I think Professor John already mentioned about this, but I think it only assesses like psychological factors. And it doesn't measure any like physical health. So I'm just curious if there is, what are your thoughts on sense of coherence? I mean, does it need to be updated, or is there any effort to kind of update the measure to make a more comprehensive, that captures the more comprehensive concept of salutogenesis? And I mean, partially the reason is, when we think about the sense of coherence, we feel like it's kind of it could be a mediator, like, or the moderator. That's what we feel. Maybe it's not capturing everything about the salutogenesis. So I just want to hear your thoughts.
Okay, thank you for the question.
Maybe here.
Thank you for the question. I mean, if you think of the sort of broad definition of sense of coherence, not its dimensions, but it's a global orientation on life. And, you know, you can have cancer and you can continue to be happy, continue to function, continue to do what's needed of you. And I think that's what Antonovsky was getting at. You know, it's your attitude to things, you know, and if you have that global orientation that things will be as well as they possibly can be, you get on and you take the treatment you need or you do the exercise you need, but it's up here, it's how you think about things. And I think those also, you know, having that kind of orientation and attitude also helps recovery. You know, because if you are positive and you say, okay, well, I've got this, but what treatments are available to me? You get a therapist like this who comes and tells you, do this exercise, cries with you, you have support, and you get on and you know, you have a far better opportunity of becoming healthy as a result of the way you've responded to the issue, you know, to the stressor. So I think that was really, it doesn't have a physical measure. Well, I mean, he did define pain, but it was all pathogenic again. But, so no, I think it's more that our orientation on life is the thing that changes the way we deal with physical stress, financial stress, relationship stress. You know, that's, it helps us to deal with all of those things in a better way. And to use the resources, the treatment, the support, you know, you use the resources. So it hasn't got a physical dimension in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we all agree the importance of salutogenic approaches to live our life and our health. Although it's very hard to get the right path to get. So now we are close this session, and thank you for your all of our presenter and also the audience. Thank you.
That'll conclude today's presentations. We still have one thing left to hear from our closing remarks from Dr. Justin Jun.
Thank you. I'm not gonna try to summarize or give an opinion or anything, because I think it's better to go home with a question. So I'm also afraid to summarize it in a wrong way, so I'm not gonna give anything related to the contents of the symposium, which we had for the last 2 days. It was an amazing conference or symposium. But I'd like to thank a few people. So, we thank the speakers and in the chairs, but then we never thank those people who are doing the work behind the scene. So thank you, first of all, Dong-hyuk. So without his fingerprint, we couldn't do anything. So thank you, Dong-hyuk, for all the work that he did. He arranged all the, YouTube live, and he was here like 2 hours early, briefing with the supporting staff and grad students. So really, without you, this would not been possible. Thank you. And also, all the grad students who helped us. 밖에 들어오라고. Yeah. 들어와. Yeah. So they were watching YouTube live and then supporting, at the registration desk, make sure that we have a coffee, make sure everybody has a name tag. So it's all the gratitude and actually help, to make this symposium possible. So, and also those people who, went to the hotel, pick up the speakers. So everybody who was involved, would you please stand up? 관련했던 대학원생들 다 일어나요? 다 일어나요. 다 일어나면 되겠네. 네. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I know there are more people, but then only a few people stood up. And also, we thanked you, all the speakers, but then, we didn't thank you enough. We couldn't thank you enough. It was amazing, because everybody blamed me yesterday and today for giving them a task, that was difficult because intellectually it was challenging. We call it creative tension. A lot of people have a very creative tension that made them think, made them struggle, it made them regret. Why did I accept this invitation to come and speak? But then all of you did a wonderful and excellent job. Don't you agree? So why don't we give them a big hand? Thank you. Thank you. And 우리 까먹은 사람 빼먹은 분 있나요? 감사할 분. 네. Okay. I think that's end of this symposium.
What about Justin?
Oh. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Okay, I think that's the end. Is there anything else that we need to do? No? Oh, parking pass. Okay, if anybody need parking, talk to him. Oh yeah. Talk to her, for parking pass. And then also, we actually had two wonderful video team. The YouTube, made this a lot. I heard from Marguerite that son of Antonovsky was very interested in this, and then probably he'll be watching. Or is he watching on live? I don't know. So
he was intending to.
Yeah.
I don't know how the time difference works.
Yeah.
But he may watch it in completion.
Okay, so all right, Abishai. So we thank all the interest because the Star Society, they posted this, in their website about a few days ago. So if they are interested, and they could have watched it, and then they can watch it, the recorded video. So everything that you said, and then everything we criticized, they're listening, and then I think and then we're going to do effort to improve it, right? So excellent. Thank you so much. And then please say congratulations to each other for attending this 2-day long, even Saturday morning. So thank you so much.